The ledger. She found the black leather ledger in the laundry basket at 5:30 in the evening. By midnight, her daughter would be locked in a cage beneath a warehouse. Her husband would be arrested, and Diane Miller would drop a 20-year-old locket, containing her own confession, into a storm drain. But that morning had begun like any other. The house was quiet. Mark had left for work at 7, kissing her on the cheek with the same mechanical gesture he'd perfected over 19 years of marriage. Diane stood at the kitchen counter, watching his gray sedan pull out of the driveway, feeling nothing in particular. The coffee was lukewarm. The mortgage payment had been made 2 weeks late. Their daughter Chloe was upstairs, still asleep, though it was nearly 9 in the morning. These were facts. Diane had learned to live by facts. She folded laundry in the master bedroom as the afternoon light dimmed to gold. The window faced the neighbor's privacy fence. A cardinal had built a nest in the elm tree just beyond. Diane noticed these things. The way the bird's red wings caught the light, the way dust motes spiraled in the window beam. Because noticing small things meant not noticing the large ones. She knelt beside the white plastic laundry basket, pulling out Mark's navy work shirts. They still smelled faintly of his cologne, which she liked, or had once liked. It was hard to remember when the liking had stopped. Her hand reached the bottom of the basket and felt something hard, rectangular. She frowned, brow furrowing, and tipped the basket over. A black leather-bound book landed on the hardwood with a heavy thud. The gold-embossed letters on the front read, "Personal Ledger, Property of M. Miller." She picked it up slowly, holding it by the edges as though it might explode. The leather creaked as she opened it. The pages were filled with frantic, messy handwriting, columns of numbers, dates, amounts. Her index finger traced a line. Second mortgage, late. Interest, 18%. Beside it, someone had drawn a red X. The word overdue was stamped in faded purple ink on the margin. She turned the page. Glossy slips of paper were tucked inside, betting slips from Blue Ribbon Raceway. The logo showed a galloping horse. The numbers swam, $40,500 in total losses. Her hand began to tremble. She whispered into the quiet room, "Oh God, Mark, what have you done?" The front door slammed downstairs. Her head snapped toward the bedroom door. Footsteps crossed the living room. Heavy footsteps, fast. She shoved the ledger under the pile of laundry, her movements jerky, panicked. The footsteps climbed the stairs. Each step was a weight. Mark kicked the bedroom door open. He wore his gray suit jacket, the tie loosened, sweat staining the collar. His eyes darted around the room before fixing on her face. He was gripping his briefcase so hard his knuckles had turned white. "What the hell are you doing in here, Diane?" His voice had an edge to it, something sharp and dangerous that she'd heard more often lately. She reached down and grabbed the black ledger from beneath the laundry. She held it up like a shield. His eyes fixated on the book, and she saw something flicker across his face. Pure panic, the kind of panic that made a liar out of anyone. "The mortgage is 2 months late, Mark." She heard her own voice shouting, high-pitched and shaking. "You've been gambling our life away." He lunged forward. His large hands grabbed her wrists, squeezing hard enough that she felt her bones grinding. He tried to wrench the ledger from her grip, his teeth gritted, his face turning deep red as he grunted with effort. Diane twisted her body, using her weight to pull away. Mark lost his footing. They crashed together into the oak nightstand. The glass lamp fell and shattered, pieces scattering across the dark wood floor like broken teeth. Mark pinned her shoulders to the floor. His face hovered above hers, contorted with rage. He ripped the ledger from her hand and stood up, breathing like a wounded animal. His chest heaved. His eyes had gone completely flat. "Don't you ever touch my things again?" he said, his voice dropping to something deadly quiet. Ever. She lay among the glass shards, a small cut on her palm bleeding onto the wood. She watched his legs as he walked out of the room, the ledger tucked under his arm. Diane sat up slowly. Her wrist throbbed. She picked a piece of glass out of her palm and watched a drop of blood fall onto her jeans. Then she stood, steadied herself, and walked to the bathroom. The mirror cabinet was white and clean, organized the way she'd organized it. Band-aids in the top drawer, aspirin, antacids. She opened the door and reached for the bandages. Behind the aspirin box was an orange plastic prescription bottle. She picked it up. The label read, Chloe Miller, oxycodone, quantity, 0 remaining. The bathroom felt very small. Diane opened the trash can beside the toilet. It was filled with dozens of empty bottles, all different names printed on the labels. John Smith, Robert Jones, Lisa Vance. Different pharmacy logos, CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid. She looked at them all, feeling something inside her chest begin to break into pieces. She's been stealing prescriptions, Diane whispered to herself. She's not just sick, she's an addict. She heard the bathroom door lock click from the outside. She grabbed the handle and pulled. It didn't budge. Mark? She pulled again, harder. Mark, open the door. She pounded on the wood with her fists. Let me out, let me out. Mark stood on the other side of the door, holding a screwdriver. He had just removed the outer handle. It fell to the floor with a clink of metal. His expression was blank, his eyes cold and distant. Stay there until you calm down, he said, his voice flat and detached. We aren't losing the house today. His footsteps moved away. Diane heard him walking downstairs, heard the front door open and close. She was alone. She looked at the window. It was frosted glass, small, the kind meant for privacy. She pushed it upward. It protested with a loud screech that echoed off the tile walls. She worked her body through the gap, head first, squeezing her shoulders through the narrow opening. Her legs kicked in the air as she shimmied out. She dropped onto the mulch of the flower bed below, tumbling over, landing hard on her left shoulder. The air knocked out of her lungs. She scrambled to her feet, dirt staining her white blouse, twigs tangled in her hair. Her hand was bleeding again. She ran. The backyard stretched out before her. The grass they'd planted together when Chloe was born, the fence they'd argued about choosing, white versus gray, 15 years ago. She chose the white fence. Mark hadn't cared at the time. The gate was at the far end, beyond the ornamental garden that no one had watered in weeks. She heard Mark before she saw him. His shout carried across the yard. Pure rage. Diane, stop right there. She vaulted over the wooden fence. Mark reached for her shoe, catching the heel for a second. She kicked backward with all her strength and felt his grip slip. She dropped into the alleyway, landing hard on the gravel. Behind her, Mark was climbing the fence, his tie flapping over his shoulder. His face was contorted in a snarl. His eyes glowed with something that didn't look human. Diane ran down the gravel alley. The street approached. A car's headlights swept across her, a sedan turning onto the boulevard. She didn't stop. She dove between two parked SUVs and crouched there, gasping for breath, her entire body shaking with adrenaline. She could hear Mark's footsteps on the gravel. They slowed. They stopped. She held her breath. His footsteps moved away, back toward the fence, back toward the house. She remained crouched between the SUVs for 5 more minutes, listening to her own heartbeat, feeling the cold metal of the car doors on either side of her. Then she pulled out her phone. She knew where Chloe would be. There were only a few places in the city where you could find that kind of product. And Chloe had let slip once, just once, a year ago, that she had a friend on Riverside Avenue. The apartment complex was dilapidated, 5 stories of faded brick with broken windows on the 3rd floor. Diane stood before the entrance for a long time, gathering the courage to walk through the door. She climbed the stairs. The smell of stale cigarettes and something chemical made her eyes water. Apartment 4B was painted a sickly vomit green. The door was chipped. She could hear low bass music thumping through the wood, the sound of laughter distorted by walls. She raised her fist and knocked. Nothing. Your girl here is just the delivery driver. Diane looked at Chloe. Her daughter was frantically stuffing the envelope into her pocket, unable to meet her eyes. Tears streamed down her hollow cheeks. A loose bill fell to the floor. Neither of them picked it up. Mark is the supplier? Diane's whisper came out like something being torn. He's been poisoning his own daughter? Chloe turned away and closed herself off, the way she'd learned to do. Diane saw the mechanism now, the way her daughter had learned to disappear into herself, the same way Diane had learned to disappear into her husband's lies. Snake pulled her into the hallway and closed the door behind them. He pulled out a gold pocket watch and clicked it open. The time showed 7:45 p.m. Mark owes me 50 grand by midnight, Snake said, his voice cold and businesslike. Short on a shipment, long on excuses. He dragged Chloe close to him, his grip on her arm brutal. He pulled a silver pistol from his waistband and clicked the safety off. He rested the muzzle against Chloe's chin. Chloe's eyes rolled back in terror. Midnight, Diane, Snake said, deadly quiet. Or Chloe starts delivering something much more permanent. Diane searched her pockets. She found a set of keys and a single $10 bill. She held them out with hands that were begging. I don't have that kind of money, she said. Please, let her go. Snake didn't even look at the money. At 9:30 p.m., Diane stood in an empty dockside warehouse and saw Mark standing over a wooden crate, frantically packing white plastic bottles into a black duffel bag. You used our daughter as a mule, Mark, she said, her voice sharp and cutting. You're a monster. He didn't look up. His hands were a blur. He zipped the bag shut with a harsh rasp, and she could see him completely coming apart, his movements becoming less like a man and more like an animal trying to escape a trap. I did it for us, he screamed. To keep the house, to keep the life you wanted. 2 men in hoodies burst from behind a stack of pallets. One swung a lead pipe. The crack of metal on bone echoed through the warehouse. Mark yelled and collapsed onto the concrete floor. The second thug grabbed Diane's hair. She reached back, grabbed his thumb, and twisted it with all her strength. She heard the snapping sound of a joint and felt the thug release her with a yelp of pain. Her teeth were bared like a wolf's. Mark crawled toward the duffel bag, his shoulder bleeding where the pipe had hit him. The first thug raised the lead pipe for another blow. Snake walked into the light, clapping slowly. The thug stepped back immediately. He looked at the duffel bag and laughed. Bravo, Mark, Snake said, his voice amused and dangerous. Truly, stealing from my own stash to pay off your debt to me? Diane stared at Mark. He hung his head, chin resting on his chest. He couldn't even look at her. Every lie was just a cover for another lie, she said flatly, her voice completely toneless. Snake kicked the duffel bag. Bottles scattered across the floor like plastic rain. He pulled a photograph from his pocket and dropped it on Mark's back. In the photo, Mark was shaking hands with a man in a police uniform. The uniform had insignia on the shoulders, the rank, commander. And the best part? Snake said casually. You've been paying Vaughn for protection with the money you lost gambling. Mark didn't move. He didn't respond. He had completely shut down. The three Millers were shoved into a rusted iron cage in the warehouse basement. Snake slammed the doors shut and looped a heavy chain through the bars. The floor of the cage was covered in wet cardboard and old newspapers. The air smelled like rust and something chemical and something else. Something rotten. Chloe was curled in a fetal position, shivering violently. Her skin was a sickly gray. She clawed at Diane's arm, her whole body racked with tremors. "I need it, Mom," Chloe whispered, her voice raspy like a prayer. "Please, only one. My head is exploding." Mark sat in the corner of the cage, staring at his hands. He didn't look at the wife he'd chased or the daughter he'd poisoned. He had gone somewhere else entirely. Somewhere inside himself, where no one could reach him. Diane felt around the cage floor in the darkness. Her fingers found something metal. A discarded needle, probably from one of Snake's packages that had torn open. The metal was cold. Her eyes sharpened as she picked it up. She used the needle as a lockpick. She jammed it into the padlock, remembering her days as a rebellious youth. Before Mark, before the house, before she'd learned to be silent about everything. Her fingers danced with precision. Sweat dripped from her nose onto the lock. "I'm not dying in a box for your secrets, Mark," she said, her voice low and fierce. The lock popped open with a metallic snap. The chain slid to the floor. She pushed the cage door open. At 11:45 p.m., Diane crept up behind Snake. He was counting bills on a desk, stacking them into neat piles. She swung a heavy fire extinguisher, hitting him square in the back of the head. The impact made a sound like a bell being struck underwater. Snake collapsed. Money flew everywhere, scattering like green snow across the warehouse floor. Diane grabbed Snake's satellite phone. She dialed the one person she could trust, not a cop, because the police were already bought. Her brother, Leo, he worked in internal affairs. "Leo," she said, her voice steady and authoritative. "It's me. I have the ledgers. And I have Vaughn. Bring everyone." By 12:30 a.m., the sirens were everywhere. Diane wrapped a red wool blanket around Chloe's shivering shoulders as EMTs loaded her into an ambulance. The blue and red lights flashed across Diane's face, casting her in alternating colors. She touched her daughter's forehead, moving a strand of dark hair out of the way. Mark was led away in handcuffs. He stopped for a second, looking at Diane. He tried to speak, but she turned her back on him. The police car door closed. His reflection disappeared into the tinted glass. The warehouse was quiet then, except for the sound of evidence being photographed and cataloged. Diane reached into her pocket and pulled out the locket she'd worn for 20 years. Gold, worn thin in places. She clicked it open. Inside was a photo of the family on their last vacation. They were smiling. The sun was bright. For a moment in time, the photo had captured something that looked like happiness. She turned the photo over. There was writing on the back, her own handwriting from 10 years ago. "The day I first saw him take the pills. The day I chose to be silent." She stood at the edge of a storm drain. The darkness below was absolute. She held the locket over the opening. The wind whistled through the warehouse vents. She released her fingers. The locket fell. It hit the bottom with a small splash. She could hear the water moving down there in the darkness, carrying things away. She walked toward the ambulance. She did not look back at the warehouse or at the police cars or at the place where her husband had been loaded into a vehicle in handcuffs. She walked into the white glare of the hospital lights and disappeared.